Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, thank you for joining us for another episode of All the Angles, the Business of Padel podcast worldwide, powered by the Hexagon Cup. This week, our objective is to give you, our audience, a unique insight into IMG's entry into the padel market, which was announced about 2 months ago. I'm joined on this episode by Astrid Thams, the managing director at the high-profile and groundbreaking padel team event, the Hexagon Cup. And we're fortunate enough to explore this area with the very people who are driving IMG's future direction in this industry, in this sport. We've got Hernan and Daniel, who are basically the two individuals who have been tasked by the IMG leadership to explore and succeed in the field of padel. So thank you both for joining us. Before we get started, if you enjoy this episode or have benefited from previous ones, please like, share, subscribe. It helps. So, without further ado, let's get started. Gentlemen, I don't usually like to go into the background of people who join the episodes because I feel it's a little bit fluffy, it's a little bit too informal, it's not very functional. But I think in this episode, it really serves a purpose because both of you have been handpicked by IMG leadership to drive what IMG is doing in this padel space. And obviously there is a reason for that. You two both have a very varied and respectable position in the padel ecosystem and the padel history and the padel journey. So I'd like to start with that personal introduction. I'd like to understand from both of you, if you could just give me a quick understanding of why you, basically. What is it in your background, experience, journey, relationships? What is it that puts you in pole position to really help IMG with its ambitions going forward?
Well, first of all, hello to both. A pleasure to be here with you. Well, I don't know what was the reason. I hope because I try to do my best when I work. But well, first of all, I was a professional player. That's my background. My background starts with tennis first, and then I started playing professional padel when I was 20 years old, back in 1991, when this sport was just coming out in Argentina and Spain and Mexico as well. So my background is more in the first part of my life was to be a professional player. I played 22 years on the tour. I was in the top ranking. And so I stopped playing in 2012 when I was playing the Master Finals in Madrid. And then when I was 42 years old, and I decided to stop playing. In that time, I was ranking number 3 in the world. But I felt that there was something that had to change in my life, coming to a new decision of leaving the professional segment and coming into the business of the padel. So back in that time, I was approached by World Padel Tour. It was the biggest tour in the world in that time. And the reason they came to me was to try to help them to develop the sport outside from Spain. In 2012, when I stopped playing, the sport was only in Spain. So the reason they hired me was to try to do the expansion of the tour around the world. So I worked there for 7 years. It was a great experience working over there. We built more than 15 tournaments around the world from 2013 to 2021. And then I was approached by private equity from Sweden, Triton. They built a new company called Let Up. And they started working around different business around padel. So I worked there for 3 years. I was in the management group, and also I was leading one of the most prestigious manufacturer of courts in the world, Mejor Set. And I think it was in February of this year, I was approached by IMG, and Danny also introduced me to them, and we started speaking over there. In that time, I was having this work in Let Up. So, well, this was coming out with some talks during a couple of months, and finally they decided to hire me and start the division with Danny, with IMG.
In my case, well, I've been connected to the sport for over 24 years, and I have been realistically an entrepreneur of padel. There's always the business side of the sport that has really tricked me. So I think that for IMG, this has been something pretty interesting. Since it's an underdeveloped area of the business, there is a component which is very creational. This is about creating how to bring a well professionalized and standardized company like IMG into a new world, a very fresh and new world, a new sport, which is padel. I think that the mixture of having the business and the sport side of it and having this creative area of the business that will help IMG to position on the top segment, because we're talking about Arturo Coello, we're talking representation, but there's a hell of a lot of actions that need to be put in place to escalate this. So I think that this was the interesting thing for IMG from an our end, that possibility to be creative in a world that they are not so familiarized with, which is paddle.
Thank you. And really nice to see you again. Our founder, Enrique Buenaventura, shared just a couple of weeks ago during the evening that we did Business of Padel, the panel with Hernan. So it's really nice to see you both again. And you know how happy we are in Hexagon that IMG has now joined the paddle ecosystem, as this is going to make a big impact. And I would think my question for you would be to understand why has IMG decided to do it now? Okay, it's clear why they've chosen you. Couldn't be a better choice. But why now? We in Hexagon, we started a year ago. We identified the opportunity and maybe even the need to enter the paddle industry to support a more professionalized growth. But what has IMG seen? Is there any specific metric or any event that has triggered that the moment is now?
Well, from my end, what I can say is two big parameters. One is the fact that paddle starts becoming known in the US, and US, of course, is leading economy in the world. So at the moment, there's more and more things happening around paddle in the US, especially in Miami, which is one of the headquarters for IMG. Of course, when your company starts being surrounded by not only tennis or the consolidated sports, but paddle, first one is, okay, what is going on here? What is this thing of paddle that we might have underestimated? The second one is the caliber of the sponsorship money that there is around the top players. So now these figures have grown virally in the last 4 years. When we look into a sponsorship agreement on a top 10 player 4 years ago to now, those numbers have changed massively. So of course, with these two components, on our end, this is interesting for ING to say, we really need to step in here. We're missing something. We really need to get on board.
And just for your information, IMG was trying to enter the sport since the last year and a half. So they have been, scouting. They have been looking for the best way to enter the sport. So it's not just in the last 4 or 5 months. They were in the last close to 24 months just looking at the sport. They were going to some tournaments, watching. They were doing some scouting about the sport, about the business. So the decision was done in the last 4 months, finally, but they were decided to get into the paddle like a year before.
And before we go into the business of what IMG is offering the paddle space, I want one final question on the personal element. So, as you both mentioned, Daniel, Hernan, you've got a lot of history, a lot of strong, trusting relationships in the space going back many years, decades sometimes. Have you felt in the last 2 months since you've been announced as the IMG representatives in this sport, have you felt a change in the way people react to you, your old contacts? Are they nervous around you? Are they excited for you? Are they asking lots of questions? Are they a little bit hesitant? Now that you've got IMG behind your back, how has that changed anyway, the way your relationships are with the people that you know and love and have worked with closely for the last 10, 20 years?
Well, on my end personally, yes. I mean, of course, when a company like IMG announces their way into paddle, some people feel very excited about it and they see a lot of potential opportunities, business opportunities. Other ones, they also feel threatened, of course. Paddle is still a fairly small market when you look into other bigger sports. So, of course, it still feels a small market. And when there is a big player coming into a small market, then of course that creates a lot of different reactions, some good, some not that good. But I think that time will also stabilize things, I mean, it's been very recent since the launch of IMG. I think that with time, everything will settle down. And when they see little by little the vision of IMG, that will also calm a little bit more the waters. Now, of course, it's a big one when you announce that IMG goes into paddle.
What about from your perspective, Hernan?
No, it's the same feeling as Danny. People are excited. You have a lot of phone calls, emails. We are knowing all the big company because IMG is a huge company with WME and Endeavor. So we are knowing all the people inside of the company. So we are taking a lot of time to understand more about it. Everybody is super excited. People are asking what you're going to do. Why is IMG in Padel? What do you want to do? How many players do you want to have? Well, we are in the first step. We just launched the division 2 months ago. So there's a lot of things to do. And we are here to help the paddle grow. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree that from us seeing IMG entering the paddle ecosystem definitely is confirming that there's a big and fast development now of this professionalism that we are talking of the industry. So it clearly shows that it's the right time to build this solid ecosystem with the top actors that are coming from other sports and as well pushing to bring paddle to the next level. So it's all good news to have you guys as part here now.
That's for sure.
So let's move on to the main chunk of the conversation, which is about player representation, which is where IMG has obviously decided to focus the tip of its spear into the paddle space. You picked up Mr. Coello, not a small move, going for the number one, young number one, lots of potential. So I guess the first question is, why did you go for Coello? What was it about him specifically that felt like he's right for IMG and he's right for the first person?
On my end, I can say that, of course, Coello is a player that, first of all, the way he plays and the caliber of the person, the aura that there is around Coello is very powerful. He is a guy that also has the vision to do things bigger. He is a guy that has the vision to grow the sport through him. He really sees himself like a number one in every single thing that he does. Even when playing marbles with his friends, he wants to be the number one. So he is number one material. He's got great looks. I mean, I think Arturo Coello has a very good presence on the court. And of course, being the youngest number one player to get the 4 consecutive majors in the same year, I mean, when you start putting all those things together, it's a clear match for the IMG machinery to try to elevate him, to try to put all the energies on him. So I think from my end, it was the first reference that you can aim for.
What I think from Arturo, of course, everybody knows who is he as a player, no? I mean, he's the number one. He's a super talent player, as everybody knows. But I think that is what Danny was saying, is like, I think that Arturo was seeing IMG as a possibility of also helping the paddle grow all over the world. I think that has that mentality that he wants to go to the next level in terms of getting paddle in all the areas, in all the countries worldwide. I think that that's the main reason why Arturo decided to come to IMG. And I think he did a great move over there. And also Mickey, his manager, he has the same mentality, try to make the sport grow all over the world. And I think that's why they say, okay, let's go with IMG and help each other to get the sport bigger and bigger.
I think we have, if we look into comparisons from the past, I think these players are a game changer, like it was maybe back in the days Fernando Belasteguin, somebody that he was always trying to find the next step on international the sport. And I think that the sport owes him a lot in that sense. For sure, it has been a rough path at many times, but always with the vision of taking the sport into another dimension. And with people like that, this is when the sport gets the benefit. So Arturo has that profile, has that mentality to say, let's bring the sport to the next level. So it's not only about the player, it's also about his mentality, what his contribution can be to the sport.
Yeah, the two things that I pick up about Arturo from the little I've seen of him is, one, he's got his feet very firmly on the ground, right? He's always surrounded by his family, by Mickey, who he knows and trusts. So there's a humbleness to him. And the other thing speaks to your point about Bella, is his sense of innovation. I saw him practicing in Madrid and I saw him getting frustrated with people picking up his X3. So he was practicing how he can hit an X3 so that it hits the light. So when it bounces, it hits the light, because once it hits the light, the point is dead. So he was like, how can I innovate the game? How can I innovate my attacking shot to make it unreturnable so it doesn't come back? And that kind of creative thinking about tactics and techniques is something that's not like we're number ones, cool. It's like we're number ones. How do we stay number ones? How do we make sure we're always ahead of what the next guys behind us who are biting at our heels? We always need to keep that distance ahead of them.
Agree?
I think we were all saying all the time, let's bring paddle to the next level. You need to have these heroes to be able to do that. That's why it's so important to have now someone like Arturo with a machine like IMG behind them. Because if you have these heroes, then you will be able to enter or to have more mediatic sports, then you will have people wanting to watch it. And all this brings more money. Then you have the sponsors wanting to be the broadcast. And all this is going to make the money flow to the paddle industry. So it's absolutely best news to have players or heroes now like Arturo being pushed to the next level, 100%.
Correct. Correct, Astrid. Agree 100%.
And one thing, we had a previous episode where we spoke to a few other player agents, and two things that we discussed was, in terms of the evolution of players and player expectations, was one, the English language is now no longer a nice to have, it's a must have.
It's a must.
And the second thing was these players need to become much more comfortable with social media and content creation. They just need to understand that's now part of their obligation. It's not just about winning matches and picking up trophies. It's about creating content, creating ways for fans to engage with them. Again, I'm getting the sense with Arturo, who's very young, he is into engaging with sports and heroes in sports that he loves. So he knows what they're doing, what the footballers are doing, what the tennis players are doing. So this is not like trying to teach an old dog new tricks, right? This is about a young person who already is fluent with these requirements of modern heroes, modern celebrity. Was that part of the thinking as well?
It's a thing. I mean, he is already in the making. I mean, you will see in coming weeks, months, very cool things from Arturo's. And we have a very important element, I think, for the development of the sport, which is to connect fans to pros. When you see emerging markets, you see a lot of people playing paddle, but very few have knowledge about who is the top 10. I mean, this Friday I was in London on a few meetings, on a paddle club. It was full of people, and I know that if I go around and I ask to the fans, okay, could you name a number one in the world? Could you name potentially 2 top 10s? That fans are not there. So what this is about is creating the fan base with the professional players. When that link is created, then you know that the sport is going to elevate. So in Arturo's case, he's very aware of that. He's very aware by himself. I mean, this is a thing that comes from himself and from Mickey, that if I want to have access to emerging markets, to a different world of brands, the way people perceive me and the way I connect with people, this is very important. That's why it's no longer conceivable that people don't speak English. That's why it's no longer conceivable that people only promote themselves when they win, but not when they lose, or outside the court too. So Arturo is very aware by himself, and together with Mickey, here Mickey plays a very important role to advise him and to show him in the best of ways. So then he starts connecting with a different audience as well. And this is when you know that as a sportsman, you start opening new markets, which is totally in line of what we're totally aligned from IMG perspective, supporting all these things, plus the ones we try to innovate. So he is that person, realistically.
Yeah, I heard a story a few years back about, I think he was a Danish badminton player who quietly, without telling many people, decided to start learning Chinese because he realized that if he could go to China, speak Chinese in badminton, it would be a game changer for him in terms of growing the sport, but also in terms of establishing his position in that sport and in that massive fan base. So I'm sure Arturo's probably, as you mentioned, getting the same advice, not just from you two, but from Mickey, which neatly brings us on to the question of Mickey. So what I wanted to understand a little bit clearer, just so you could kind of spell it out, how is that division now working? Just for the sake of the audience, so that they're 100% clear. What is it that IMG and you two guys are going to be taking care of for Arturo? And what is Mickey going to be taking care of going forward for Arturo?
Well, we are a team. That's the answer. Arturo and his manager is Mickey, and Mickey is working with us. Of course, Mickey is more in the day by day with Arturo. He's every day with him. He's taking care of everything that he needs and also helping him with the sponsors. But we are connected 100%. So every move that we do with Arturo, Mickey knows, he knows. And the same in the way that Mickey is moving with Arturo, is everything connected with us. So that's the answer. We are a team and we work all together.
And is that a model that you guys want to repeat with other players, or is that something that you're very flexible around? Like, there could be a Mickey for the next player, there could not be a Mickey for the next player. You guys are comfortable, you guys can create a structure around the player?
No, we are flexible in the way we work, but also IMG is the one that is taking care of the players. In this case, as I told you before, we are a team, and maybe in the next player that we look on the woman or man, female or male, there's another way of doing it. But the only thing that we know is that IMG is the one that represents the player. And sometimes we work together with the managers and sometimes no, because it depends on how the player is approached. And maybe tomorrow we get a young player of 15 years old or 16 and he doesn't have any manager, so we work directly with him. Or sometimes like Arturo, he already has a manager and we work together.
Now, touching what you said, you have any plans of maybe signing as well a woman player? And if you're seeing same opportunities out there, I think you know that in Hexagon, the teams we do in the Hexagon Cup, you have the male, female, and then you have the next generation category, which last year was male, this year was going to be female. And it's true that we support having the same opportunities. The price is the same for male and female from Hexagon. But I don't know if from your point of view, how you see that and how your plans are around this.
No, this sport is male and female, 100%. No doubt about that. Padel is like that. And no doubt about IMG. If you see, we belong to the IMG tennis division. So if you see the tennis, they have the top men and the top female. So there's no reason why we're going to not do it. The only thing is that it takes a little bit of time. Why? We just launched the division 2 months ago, and now we are just start moving. But for sure, we are looking for having a great female player, for sure.
Yeah, this goes back a bit to what we were saying at the beginning when you launched the division of IMG into Padel. It creates stormy waters, there's a lot of water up and down. So we need the waters to calm down a little bit. So we have the clear vision, and everybody has a clear vision of what our ambition is. And yes, in the same way that we have Arturo Coello, we are having plans to have a female representation and next gen, which is also vital. I mean, IMG supports strongly the foundations of the sport. This is also connected to a whole plan of activations that we need to do as well at a youth level, since the paddle, it's a sport that is still not very consolidated at early stages in all countries. So what we would like to see in the future, it's a tour with players from the United States, right? From China, right? From India, from everywhere. But in order to see that means that we need to act on the base, on the foundation of the sport, because it's still not that consolidated. That's why we want to act on those two levels, top of the pyramid, but bottom of the pyramid. So we're also sending the right signals to the world to say, guys, if we don't invest in the youth, God knows what sport we're going to have in the next 15 years, right?
So, guys, I'm going to give you an opportunity to exclusively announce any other players that you have signed or are about to sign. No?
No.
Well,
we're taking it easy. Alex. As we said, we need time. People need time as well, so things get calm and nobody makes a funny move because there's a lot of noise. We are not very supportive on when there's just noise. We want facts and we want strong foundations. And we know the priority, which is Arturo. We are eyes full on him just to make sure that IMG is bringing the best for him. That is part of the journey. We have our timelines well defined, and when it's the right time to take that step, then we will take it.
I've got to try. I've got to try and get these things out of you. But,
Good one.
Well, actually, just before we move out of the player representation piece, obviously you can't talk about specific individuals, and you don't want to say too much too early because, as you say, you're waiting for things to settle down. But can you give us and our audience a sense of what are the ingredients or elements of a player that you're looking for? I'm sure it's not as simple as a tick box exercise, right? Every player has pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses and characters and things like that. But what are the ingredients, generally speaking, that really draw you towards a player? What is it that catches your interest before you obviously then go into the specific due diligence and details?
Well, first of all, we look in the talent of the player, how he is as a player. If he's the next gen, of course, you see him as a future star and how he can manage to get to that level. When it's players that are already in the top ranking, that they're good enough because they're in the top ranking. So what we are looking there also is how they are as a player in terms of how they behave, how the look and feel is of the player, what we can explore with them and getting even better. There's a few things, in how is he's like a person. The most important thing when you look for representation of players is the talent, how he can play, and how he can improve in his top positions in the ranking. But also it's important to understand that what we are trying to work is to help them to get much well known worldwide from IMG. IMG has a lot of experience in the sport, in representation. So we would try also to help the players to get much well known worldwide. And the thing is that when it comes to English, this sport was in the last 20 years was only play, or 30 years was play only in Spanish places, countries. Now with all the work that has been done in the last 10 years, it's getting more and more international. So I think it was in Rome, I was just listening to some of the players, and all of them, they're learning and taking English lessons. So I think that it takes time, but in the next 2-3 years, most of the players, they will speak English, no doubt about that.
Yeah, in the end, IMG is representing stars, right? So we have to see what is a star. How does a star look? How does a star play? How does a star talk? How does a star talk in the good moments and in the bad moments? How there is all these considerations for somebody to be seen as a potential IMG player. Sometimes when you finish your match, whether if it was better or worse, you're going to have a press conference. And you're going to have to do it, whether if you like it or not. And if you have sponsors, you need to treat your sponsors in the best of ways. So you can't be that selfish. You need to understand this Padel ecosystem, what surrounds the player and how the player is interacting constantly with that ecosystem. Often we see that players create this interaction only on the good times, but on the bad times, not so much, right? Because everybody's pissed off about losing, whatever. So these are the considerations that we're seeing from IMG. Who has potential star material? Talent it's one of them, of course, but their discipline, their commitment to all these things that happen outside the court. So when you put those things in place, of course, potentially the stars could align when looking for a player.
Maybe this is a bit of a crazy question, but does IMG do anything like personality research and analytics to try and understand? Because you could easily say, oh, I've got a good feeling about this kid. He's flexible, he's hungry. I've got a good feeling about this kid. But you could also have some scientific approach to that, where you create a standardized test which tells you the kind of personality that they are and whether in fact they do have the ingredients that you're looking for. We're all driving towards a much more data-driven world. And I can see how obviously there's data when we analyze talent and we analyze performance and we analyze power and all those things. But you talk about these personality traits, the ability to be flexible, the ability to be ambitious, the ability to problem solve, the ability to understand and respect your obligations. All of those things, they're a little bit more difficult to monitor. But does a company like IMG try and find a more scientific approach or survey or questionnaire to help on those traits?
Of course, IMG has a lot of experience in the representation of players. If you go to consolidated sports like tennis, like golf, the reports that the agents create on the players, it's insane. Because not only you want a good player, you want a player that connects with the community, and that is more connected to the psychological profile of the person. It might go wrong or it might go right, but yes, there are all these reporting tools that we have that are evaluated when thinking about a player to be approached by IMG, and especially at early stages in the paddle market. It's very important to make the right moves from IMG perspective. When you have, for example, other divisions like tennis, where you have 75 players represented, of course, you need to open a little bit more the scope, because it's a very consolidated sport, business opportunities everywhere. But for us, it's very important to make the right move with the right person that has the right values, morals, appearance on the court, connection, communication. Everything has to be very well measured. It's our first move, so that's why we have to choose carefully.
And a good person with the manager as well. That's very important.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, if you're working as a team, the team's got to work well and efficiently, right?
Yeah.
So now for the final big chunk of this conversation, I'd like to move the focus a little bit more broader. So IMG is not just in the player management business. If you go to the IMG website, there's event ownership, there's media rights, there's data rights, there's distribution into new channels, there's academies, sponsorship, brokering, there's management, consulting. I mean, IMG offers services that you can't even imagine in the whole of a sport ecosystem, whether it's American football, whether it's tennis, whether it's golf. So you guys are obviously experts and are launching and are prioritizing player management, but is there a medium to long-term strategy to roll out that broader range of IMG services into the paddle space? And has that already started? Has that evaluation started? Are there services that are already looking like in pole position for the future and some that just look like non-starters because of the nature of the ecosystem as it stands today?
Yeah, we're working, let's say, at three different paces, yeah? Short term, mid term, and long term. When we look into the picture of paddles, it's still an emerging sport. It has grown really quick, nobody can doubt that. But when you look into, from a development point of view, to United States, it's still at early stages. When you look into a development point of view, from UK, early stages, China, it's just starting. So, of course, we are working with this short-term strategy, which is player representation, like what we're doing with Arturo, but we're also considering events. Of course, IMG, one of the strongest legs of IMG is the events. Here we have a particular case. Premier Padel does not sell events like the ATP, where IMG is owner of certain events. Yep. But we like events, and we like Arturo. So we're trying to put these two pieces of the puzzle together, but just with a deeper purpose. If we can connect short term with mid term with long term, then we are spot on the strategy, right? So we're trying to connect everything also with the youth. Like, what is the footprint that a potential event in a certain country could look like for the upcoming 10 years? And what can be the seed for the younger generations? Because the younger generations will be part of the long-term project for IMG. So that brings us to consultancy opportunities as well for emerging markets, clubs, institutions, to rely on IMG to be part of the development of the sport in a particular country. We look into certain countries, they don't even have a federation, or the federation has just started, and there is no expertise on that federation. So potentially coaches could not be educated. And if coaches cannot be educated, who's going to teach the kids in the best of ways? And even though you've got the coaches, maybe you don't have the infrastructure of an academy. So these are part of the long-term actions that we are considering for the sake of the sport, for the sake of having a healthy representation at a global level from all countries that can feed the professional tour with players from all over the world. And this is where brands, non-endemic brands, will start being connected to the sport as well. Because if we look into the paddle world, still it's a world represented of endemic or brands connected to paddling. If we want to elevate that, then we need to act at a bottom level as well. So we can define the IMG strategy into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And for that, we have to act at all levels, because the sport still does not have strong foundations in all the countries in order to provide sports in the way we want to.
And are there specific geographies that you guys are prioritizing? Obviously, you mentioned US because of the IMG's center of gravity. So I would imagine US is an opportunity. I mean, it's an opportunity for pretty much anyone who's interested in paddle. But are there any other markets that you guys are thinking that, A, they're interesting because paddle is really starting to bubble in that country, but also IMG and its network is well positioned to really support that growth in that market, maybe through offices or established teams. Is there a sense of prioritization in certain areas of the world, or at the moment it's actually not that specific?
No, yes, it is. Yes, it is, because as you said before, IMG has a lot of power in different parts with offices. You know, we have been talking with most of the offices they have. I think that this week we have another talk with some other areas from WME. But we have conversations with APAC, we have conversations with EMEA, of course, with America and with Latin America as well. IMG is all over the world, so it's not like we are going to prioritize, yes, but we are looking for some specific countries in Europe, Asia, and America for doing our events, yes.
And when I last met you in Wimbledon, you had just been kind of parachuted into a all-hands IMG meeting and were basically pushed onto the stage and told, these are our new paddle guys, They're going to tell you what they're going to do. It must have been quite an intimidating environment because there's so many people from so many different sports at so many different levels with so many different offerings. And you're basically trying to plug yourself into this incredibly diverse and sophisticated network. Now that you're 2 months in, how have you found the reaction of IMG internal to your addition to the team, and how has it been working with those different offices, those different teams, those different verticals?
Well, you know what? It's a very cool, motivating, and interesting journey because obviously IMG is a company that directly works with 5,000 people, 5,000 employees, plus connections with other companies. So, of course, the knowledge, this shows you as well the reality of the paddle in certain areas. I mean, when you talk about paddle in some divisions that are based in United States, in LA, in Chicago, then they're like, yeah, I've heard of this about paddle, but you know, pickleball is a real thing, right? Or correct me if I'm wrong. So it's been an educational process internally for the company as well to know what paddle is at the moment. So when we have been crossed with all the divisions and we do the presentation of paddle, and then they see the stadiums with almost 20,000 people, you know, people just going mad, and they're like, what the hell is this? I mean, what is this thing of paddle? I mean, come on, guys, we need to speed up here. So it's been really cool. And when you get to know the machinery that there is behind IMG in the world of representation, of course, the synergies that are created are really cool. I mean, there is this buzz around paddle in the company now that is like, whoa, but you know what? We're representing, I don't know, 150 superstars from the big screen. And guess what? 70% play paddle and they're obsessed with paddle and nobody knew about this. It's like, gosh. So it's a very motivating, in the same way, going back to what you were saying the first time we were in Wimbledon. It was not intimidating, it was very motivating because those that know about paddle, they're like, I can't believe you guys started with paddle. Happy days. This is so cool. So it's a very, very creative journey and process, and getting to know all these divisions only empowers and enriches the opportunities that will come along. So it's super cool. I have to say, I'm really enjoying the journey like no other.
From your experience, and now especially that you're in IMG and you're looking at opportunities, I guess the question that comes to my mind is, what obstacles still remain within the paddle ecosystem globally that are slowing down the evolution? Are there things that, if you could click your fingers, you would change about paddle today, because that would allow not just IMG but also other stakeholders to really accelerate the growth of paddle?
Let me tell you one thing before we give you this answer. I've been in this sport for the last more than 30 years, and I was working very close to develop the sport all over the world, the tour, and I was just knocking the door in countries that nobody knew about paddle, and year by year we were improving and making more and more tournaments. This is going fast. I mean, the thing is that we, as a person, we like to be much faster than what it really can go. But if I tell you how was this sport 10 years ago, not 10 years, 5 years ago, before the pandemic, I mean, you said, wow, how can this grow so fast? So I think the first answer for me would be the sport is going well. It's going well. It's going fast. Maybe people, they don't understand where we're coming from. So sometimes it's good also to say where we were before and where we are now. The professional players grew a lot in the last 4 years. I mean, they increased their sponsorship, but a lot. So I think that the sport is going in a really good direction. Of course, there's things that you are saying that has to be, improved to get that grow a little bit more. But I think that we are in the right way.
But I think this is not connected to paddle, it's more connected to the way business work these days, the here and now business, the short investment, quick return. I want to make the money here and now, and sometimes when things grow really quick, you get a lot of profiles that are just only thinking for the short-term profitability. That's why we take it easy. We want to create also the right connections, the right partnerships, getting the right people on board. And for that, you need to be calm. You need to be relaxed. Sometimes in paddle, there's so much buzz around the sport, that everybody's like, okay, there must be a way that I can make money here. That for me, it's like, okay, let's be careful about that. Let's keep our feet on the ground put one step forward at the time, being very careful where we step, because we want to create consolidation of the sport. That would be the only thing that I would say. We just need to be a bit careful. But it doesn't apply to paddle. I think it applies to daily basis almost these days. Sometimes people underestimate that this is a very difficult business. I mean, I remember back in the days when Hernan was the international director for World Paddle Tour, his life was fully dedicated day and night to find the right people, to find the right collaborations in order to put an international event in the best of ways, assuring that it's going to get traction. That takes a lot of effort. So sometimes people underestimate paddle as a difficult business to consolidate everybody. I'm sure you have met many people when you go out there that they think, this is a very easy, cheap, profitable investment. No, be careful, because it's a very difficult business and you need experts that grow the sport for the right cost. So time will tell, one step at a time.
My last wrap-up question to both of you is, I think there's a lot of speculation out in the market about what does IMG's entry mean? What's going to change now? What do we have to change now that IMG's here? You mentioned it, Danny, when you said when you've got a big player entering into a small market, there's going to be volatility, there's going to be reactions. But from your point of view, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what do you feel that IMG's entry into paddle is going to mean for other people in the space? Like, how would you summarize what is to come? What's your perspective?
Trust and security. This is what we're here for, to be a trustful brand that offers confidence to brands, confidence to players, confidence to everybody who is part of the industry. This is our job. We're not here just to prove our medals. We're not here to show that we are bigger than anybody. We just want to be a trustful partner to work with, whichever the paddle opportunity is. And for that, it just takes time. I mean, we need to prove what we're doing, and our actions will be the ones that speak for ourselves.
That's clear, Danny, and that's why we are not in a rush. We want to do it in the right way and step by step. We represent IMG, one of the biggest or the biggest company in entertainment in the world with WME. So what we need to do is do it in the right way, and as Danny said, and people to trust the way we work.
Well, that about wraps up our episode. I think everyone in the space is going to be monitoring the next year or two with what IMG does and what IMG announces, and how that has an impact on everyone else in the space. Again, please like, share and subscribe if the content was thought-provoking. Please comment on LinkedIn or Twitter if you have any recommendations around our format, topics we should devote an episode to, questions we should ask speakers we need to bring on. We want you all, those driving the next phase of the industry's future, to tell us what you want to hear about and who from. Thank you again, Hernan and Danny, for joining us. And we know that you're very busy developing and evolving the offering that IMG is going to put into the paddle market. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you, Astrid, for helping me steer the conversation. We will keep doing our best to cover all the angles of the business around paddle, episode after episode. Until the next one, thank you.